what led you to the spiritual path to Christ? Maybe if you could just talk a little bit about your story.
Um, I was not raised religiously at all. I mean, some of my youngest memories are my grandpa taking me to church. But as far as my dad, my mom, never went to church. My great grandpa actually was a Pentecostal pastor. And if you're not used to the Pentecostal world, that can be scary. So,
I'm
wasn't
not.
really.
What is that? I've heard Pentecostal, but I'm not. Maybe you could.
They were Pentecostal holiness. It was a lot of singing and shouting and running up and down the aisles, and people looking like they're having seizures in the front of the church. And it's their belief. It's the Holy Spirit upon your body that makes you do those crazy things, speaking in tongues, stuff like that. Funny thing about my great grandpa being a pastor, when he was younger, I love telling this story. I'm from North Carolina. When I was, my whole family's from up there, even though I'm in Mississippi now. But when my great grandpa was younger, he was actually banned from the city limits of the town closest to him because he kept stealing people's livestock. So after sunset, he was not allowed in town by law. And then, man became a pastor. But so my story wasn't raised in anything. When I got into high school, ninth grade, there was a pretty girl across the street. They went to church. I decided I liked her, and going to church with her would, win me some brownie points. That church turned out to be a cult. They have a compound in Georgia. Then I guess they still have it now, outside of Athens, Georgia. But that really, the preacher proclaimed himself God. That he was God, and in my view, I know now that was a cult. Looking back then, that was my view of Christianity, and these people are crazy. And I got away from that. I got away from the church. I mean, I went to a couple different churches with a couple different people, but I pretty much had a image of Christianity in my mind. Um, excuse me, dealing with allergies down here. The oak pollen is covering everything. The Where was I at? Okay, so 10th, 11th grade, met some people, kind of got into witchcraft and paganism. I carried that with me through high school, graduation, on into the military. My dog tags had Wiccan as my religion of choice on them, and that persisted for years. I mean, we're talking straight up witches, coven meetings, circles, spells being cast, like the whole 9 yards. At some point, I was almost murdered by a guy who wanted into the coven that I was in, and it was kind of my first exposure to something demonic. Was this guy? And then I started noticing a lot of, um, I say demonic. I look back now knowing it's demonic. Then I didn't know what I was dealing with, right? But I knew it was bad, and I wanted to get away from it all. So I ended up getting out of that. Um, I kept the moniker the pagan for a couple more years because I was a tattoo artist at the time, and that was my tattoo name was pagan. Um, kind of became. I told everybody at the time atheist. I know now I was agnostic. I knew something was there. Didn't know what was there. Didn't look into it because at the tattoo parlor, man, it was drugs and alcohol and girls, and you know, it went a different girl a week was not unheard of. It was just a party life for years, and couldn't shake the emptiness inside of me that alcohol and drugs and girls was not fulfilling. So I began exploring, and I explored, and I explored Buddhism, I explored Islam, I explored Taoism. I looked into Hinduism. Hinduism was pretty close to paganism, and the Celtic and Norse gods that we were doing. The Hindus have all their gods, but I never really settled anywhere until I met the woman that's now my wife. So we left North Carolina, moved to Mississippi together, and still dating at this time. And she was like, "I want you to come to church with me." And I resisted for a little while, and finally, I was like, "All
At
right,
what
I'll go
age were
with
you
you."
at? Because you had mentioned 10th, 11th, and now where was
I'm at 29 years old now.
after all of this? Okay.
Yeah. So this exploration, I spent a decade exploring everything. So I started at 23, looking into Buddhism, and by the time I got to 29, almost 30 years old, I kind of had settled back into being agnostic, because I wasn't finding what I was looking for, but I was not going back to the crazy Christians, because I didn't had my fill of that. I remember the singing, dancing, seizures when I was younger. I remembered the guy screaming he was God at the front of the church I attended in high school. Like, I didn't want no part of any of that, right?
What did the girl say? Just out of curiosity, from ninth grade, what got you into that at the beginning? Was she like, when you started saying like this is kind of crazy? Did you relay that to her, and like what was her response, if any?
She said, "This is who we are."
Wow. So she was in it.
She was in it, which I did find out after high school. She got away from it.
Yeah.
She ran off to California with somebody, and I don't know what happened to her in that time period that turned her. But a lot of groups like that, a lot of bad things tend to happen.
Sure.
You can only imagine.
Yeah.
But I told her that it's. I told her they were crazy. I told them all of them was crazy. I've been pretty blunt my whole life, and she was like, "It's who we are." And I still remember having that. I snuck out my bedroom that night and met her on the road, and we talked, and walking up and down the road talking, and that's when all that went down. And I'll never forget her looking at me. She goes, "That's just who we are." But I never went back to the church, and they repeatedly invited me to come back many times, but I never accepted.
So back to Mississippi, 29,
Mm-hmm.
10 years of exploring. You're now in a place where you're agnostic, essentially, and what leads from there?
So my then girlfriend, now wife, she was like, "I'd really enjoy it." Okay, so when I met her, she already had 2 sons. Right. So I come into this pre-made family. And I say that to say this. She looked at me. She goes, I would like us to attend church as a family." She goes, "You don't have to. There's no pressure." But she would invite me every so often. "Hey, love it if you came to church," or "Hey, come the night. We got a potluck afterwards." And eventually, I started. Yeah, I'll go. And I went, and the church wasn't. It still was weird for me. So it was an independent fundamental Baptist church they were going to, and there's a lot of legalism there, a lot of legalism, and I was aware of it just because I had begun studying the Bible myself. Because she liked to have conversations and talk to me about things, and she would read something and she'd be like, "What do you think this means?" So I started studying to just be able to intelligently talk with my girlfriend. But I can look past. I'm one of those people. We don't have to agree on everything. I can look past the small stuff. I can look past the church saying women will have to wear dresses and long hair or they're in sin. Like, to me, that's stupid. That's not in the Bible anywhere. And but again, I can look past that. I can look past men are supposed to wear suits. I look pretty good in a suit, so I didn't mind wearing a suit every Sunday, because there was a basic gospel truth in there that I was finding from my own reading that I was I agree. All right, this is biblical. I still wasn't sure how much of it I believed, but I could at least say he's agreeing with what I'm reading. Right. Um, 31, my daughter was born, and it was that year. Been going to church for a couple of years at this point. I had a moment in my backyard one night. I was drinking, smoking, out here listening to loud music by myself, and I got driven to my knees by something, and I just started bawling, and I just begged Christ for forgiveness, and I don't know what brought any of that on, because I was having a good old time by myself drinking. Right, that was my conversion moment. Set down the beer for a long time after that, and started taking church more serious. I was there every time the doors was opened. Started to kind of fall into the independent fundamental Baptist legalism and everything. I started grasping on everything. You know how the new Christian is when they're hot and they're on fire for everything that they can just absorb, even if that absorbing can be bad teaching. But that's another conversation. And that was my conversion. I was 31, almost 32 years old when I finally hit my knees and accepted Christ for who Christ is.
Would you say that, because that, that when I hear that, it's like, I feel like it's some of the weakest moments in my life. I've been looking for that sign, right? It's almost like a blessing. Would you say that, and not everyone is that fortunate, their journey can be a lot slower, but, to also say that you went through the 10 years of searching and a lot of the hell that you went through, you could say that kind of led you that. But would you say that in that moment your heart was open, like in that period of your life where you're like, I really want some answers here, or I'm in a position where I'm letting go, like what is the truth? When that night kind of happened, you were going to church with your wife, and this was kind of, like, I'm looking for answers. I have an open mind. Lead me. Like, was it in that window?
Um, all right, I'll tell the rest of the story. So I
Okay.
don't tell this part of the story because a lot of people think I'm nuts.
Yeah. Well, fuck
That
'em.
that night I hit my knees, I was bawling and crying. And when I say my mind's eye, you can see the picture in your head that you can see, right?
Yeah.
Um, when I was bawling, I could see someone standing behind me, and I felt a love so strong that I thought it was going to kill me. Like I don't know how else to describe that. The feeling of love and joy was so heavy in my chest I couldn't breathe, and I thought it was going to kill me. And I don't tell that story again because a lot of people think I'm nuts, but I think I saw Christ standing behind me. I don't think I could deny it at that point. You know,
Yeah.
it was I want you. I'm coming to grab you and claim you and take you with me. So my heart was definitely open at that point, and then, yeah, I just began absorbing everything I could absorb, wherever I could absorb it from. We're talking. I was on YouTube watching Paul Washer and Leonard Ravenhill sermons, and there's a mix up. There's a sermon mix up called the greatest or the most anointing preaching ever. It's on YouTube, and it is a mixture of different preachers preaching different sermons, and there's music playing in the background, and it's so strong and it's so powerful. And I was just taking in everything I could take in, and I still do that all these years later. I'm on a different level now, and but yeah, there's no end to my learning. There's no end to what I'm absorbing because there's no end to God, and there's no way that any of us can understand Him fully in a thousand lifetimes of learning.